Before I begin the video, I do want to say that it is the 20th anniversary of Resident Evil 4 as of January 11th. Hopefully this video is out by then. Probably not. But this game absolutely means the world to me. I have beaten this game countless and countless of times. My favorite version honestly being the Wii version because of the motion controls, of course, and it's like probably one of the most fun I've ever had in a Resident Evil title. I played Resident Evil 4 for the first time for the Nintendo GameCube, and I'm not going to lie, I didn't necessarily like the game too much because of the controls, of how difficult it was at the time. But as time grew, I learned to appreciate the game a lot more, and it became one of my favorite games of all time. To me, is my personal one of my favorites in the Resident Evil franchise. It's not my favorite Resident Evil, but it's definitely up there still when it comes to being one of my favorite games of all time. But 20 years is crazy. In 4 years, Resident Evil 5 is gonna also be 20 years, man. Time is moving by so freaking fast. I can't believe it's been 20 years, but again, happy 20 years to Resident Evil 4. And what better way to do this video than, to talk over with some Resident Evil 4 gameplay. So let's get right into it. So what this video is going to be about is essentially Dusk Golem. Yes, Dusk Golem, the 50-50 leaker who actually has some educated speculations. I do want to go over this, and also I want to give my thoughts on the whole thing at the end of the video. This is specifically about Resident Evil 9, Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil 0 movie, apparently Code Veronica, basically what's going to happen in 2025 when it comes to Resident Evil. And this is his speculation, but it says, so here's some educated speculation, but it is speculation. On how I believe Resident Evil stuff is going to go down in the next couple years. Well, he says years, not year. So 2025, we may have Resident Evil, we might not have Resident Evil, so I agree on that. So Screen Gems, Constantine Films have a contract to retain the rights to the Resident Evil brand for filmmaking, which if you guys do not know, so basically what happens is Resident Evil just has to keep making Resident Evil movies every 5 years, which is why it sometimes comes out the way they do, only because, the projects are essentially out of rush more than projects of passion, so it kind of shows. And it says they need to release a new Resident Evil film every 5 years. That's what he says here. Fiscal. So the new Resident Evil film directed by Zach Kreger that starts filming pretty soon basically needs to release before fiscal year 2026 is up, since Welcome to Raccoon City released in 2021. And this new film I'm assuming he's talking about is the Resident Evil 0 film, which apparently we are going to get like some sort of Umbrella Chronicles type of movies, starting with Resident Evil 0 with Billy, Rebecca, and apparently Ada Wong too. I remember I covered this rumor a long time ago, but apparently Ada Wong was going to make an appearance in this live action movie as well. And it says it's been heavily rumored, leaked, this film is an adaptation of a Resident Evil 0 with Rebecca and Billy starring in it. The Switch successor is also on the cusp of being revealed, likely released this year. I think it's highly likely that Capcom will strike a marketing deal with Nintendo on their big reimagining of Resident Evil 0. It should make a good entry point to the franchise, the beginning of the story, and a big AAA game to release in the Switch's successor launch this year. Now, a few months ago, or I should say a few years ago, maybe, I don't know how long it's been, but we did have a rumor of a possible Resident Evil coming to Nintendo. But as we come to find out, this game was actually called Resident Evil Outrage, I believe it was, and this was a canceled project. Granted, it could have been the other canceled project too, like Resident Evil Hunk. It could have been either of those games. We don't know if those were going to be necessarily Switch exclusives. That was a heavy rumor back then, so it can make sense why it's kind of brought back, knowing that apparently there's going to be like a new Switch on the rise. It's going to have basically the same capacity power as the PlayStation 4, which I am completely for. I like the PS4 what it was. And if Capcom are still doing games to make a fine entry point to the series, starting with Resident Evil 0, then yeah, I guess it could be a good entry point when it comes to introducing new players that played 2 and 3 and 4 so far, that has no idea what's going on in the franchise, especially that we have introduced this new Wesker who dates back to Resident Evil 0. Maybe we'll get a Resident Evil 1 after, and maybe a Code Veronica after that. Yeah, that could be a possibility that they are just waiting to, for the Switch reveal or something like that to then release a Resident Evil exclusive game on the Switch. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of exclusive titles, only because it can, if you do not own a Nintendo console, you're just gonna feel left out. And it says, I do think Resident Evil 0 will release on everything. either at once or eventually, however. And it says here that he thinks that, well, it's gonna eventually release on everything, so it's probably just a timed exclusive, kind of like what happened with Resident Evil 4, funny enough, in the GameCube version when it actually came out on the PS2, you know, eventually. And he says, I think there's not a better time to release Resident Evil 0 Remake than now. They get to tie in the series' 30th anniversary as the beginning of the saga, tie it with the live action film that needs a release, and be a bigger new AAA release on the Switch successor in launch year. Now, this is when I don't agree, because I don't think Capcom will be dumb enough to tie any game with any live action movie, because let's be honest, I don't think it's going to be a good movie, because like I said earlier, it just feels like they are rushing these movies out just so they can keep the licensing more than they want to make the movie out of passion. And I don't think Capcom wants to tie any of their games to these movies, because I think they know this too. I think they know that yes, the movies are bad too. We are aware of this 100%. So we're not going to affiliate any of our games with the live action movies whatsoever. So that I'm a bit iffy about, because I don't know why they would do that, to be honest. And it says, however, Resident Evil 9 is also on the horizon. I think Capcom want to release it in 2026, which is possible. Yeah, it's a possibility that it can release in 2026. Ooh, losing breath. Considering that we do have the Onimusha stuff, the Okami sequel, maybe other games too. We still got Pragmata that's not even been shown yet for a really, really long time, but at least that got shown over Resident Evil 9. So we might not see Resident Evil 9 for a really, really long time, but we might see something in between or before maybe. And he says this is fully up to Capcom, but I can see them possibly doing a 30-year anniversary celebration with Resident Evil 9 and Resident Evil 0, the beginning and ending of the saga for this era of Resident Evil, a theme of beginnings and endings. Probably the live action Constantine film, and I wouldn't be surprised by a CG film tied to Resident Evil 9 to come into it as well, and this function as to sort of a 30-year anniversary celebration to the series, to see how Capcom decides to play it though. Now again, going back to what I was saying about the Constantine films being tied into the Resident Evil games, I don't think that's going to happen, because again, like I said earlier, I don't think Capcom is going to want to affiliate any of their titles, especially Resident Evil 9, with that big of a budget game to tie that into any film or CGI movie whatsoever. I don't think they want to do that. I really do think Capcom wants Resident Evil 9 to be like this GOTY contender, which is why it's taking so long, for a reveal of some sort. But that's not the only reason why I think they are taking long to release some sort of teaser of some sort. I just think they are gathering a lot of Resident Evil content to kind of stretch out to give us in the long run. Because I feel like once we get some sort of reveal to a new Resident Evil, then we're gonna get something for a CGI movie. Then we're gonna get something for a new, live action movie or a new game. So we're just gonna keep going with back-to-back Resident Evil content. That's why I think they're taking long, because I'm sure they do have a teaser for R89. I do think they do have a trailer for R89 already ready to go. I just don't think they are showing anything yet because of the release date of being so far off. But I really do think Capcom are working on multiple projects to show us, possibly overwhelm us with a bunch of content. I mean, there hasn't been anything Resident Evil related since Separate Ways, except for Nakanishi coming out that yes, they are working on a new Resident Evil, but that's so minuscule, because we kind of knew they were working on a new Resident Evil after like 5 games in like a few years. But Resident Evil 9 could possibly be a 2026 game. Whenever they're going to show it, I have no idea, but I really do believe that we are going to get a remake beforehand, maybe the so-called Switch exclusive beforehand. But I think there's a possibility that we're going to see another Resident Evil game that we have absolutely no idea of before Resident Evil 9. Even Nakanishi said it himself. Like, he said they are working on a new Resident Evil. He never said anything about Resident Evil 9. This could be a Revelations 3 for all we know, because we have to remember he also did Revelations. So it could be very, very possible that he is working on a new Revelations title, judging from his involvement in the first Revelations. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think we're actually going to get a remake before Resident Evil 9? Let me know in the comments. But if you like the content, be sure to like the video, and if you are new to the channel, welcome, and be sure to subscribe. Most importantly, guys, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'm gonna catch you guys in the next time. Please be safe and peace.